All right. So we are going to do a quick unit 6, and by quick I mean like 3 or 4 days is about all. Just because we've covered a lot of it, but there are a few things that we have not covered yet this year based on what the new curriculum has in store. So I'm going to go through today just a couple of the examples, and then over the weekend you'll finish up any of the examples that I don't go through. So you see the red circled here. These are the ones I'm going to do. Everything else is yours for practice, and then on Monday I'll go over any questions that you have. So first and foremost, remember that from Algebra 1, in fact, what we're going to talk about over the next couple of days is basically parallel and perpendicular lines. Not only writing equations for them, as you'll see today, but also on a graph and using proofs. So again, a couple days just of some of it is going to feel like review, and some of it's going to feel brand new. So remember that slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b, where you have the slope and the y-intercept. And then you also have point slope form, which is y minus y1 equals m times the parenthesis x minus x1. So m is still your slope, just like in slope-intercept, right? But now instead of having a b, because we don't have a y-intercept, we have to plug in a point for x1, y1. So you find that point, whatever it is, and you label it x1, y1, and then you plug it in. Remember that parallel lines always have the same slope, right, versus perpendicular lines. Perpendicular meaning, of course, that they create a 90-degree angle, so they will have opposite and reciprocal slopes, such as 2/3 to -3/2, okay? All right, so that's important for what we're doing here, so let's just get right to it. Write an equation of the line through the point 20, 5 with a slope of 310. Well, since you have a point and a slope, we're going to put it into point slope. So we have y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. The slope is going to be 3/10, and this is going to be x1, y1, right? So y minus 5 equals 3/10, parenthesis, x minus 20. Plugging them in, you've got the x1, y1, slope, done. Easy peasy. Okay, number 2, write an equation of the line that is parallel to the line y equals 3x minus 4 and goes to the point -2, Okay, so we have the slope here, so we've got an m of 3. So we have to have a point that goes through that. Well, we can write it one of two ways. We could just put it directly in a point slope and say it's y minus 7, because you've got x1, y1, equals 3, parenthesis, x minus a -2. So that would be two negatives make a positive. Okay, so that's one way you could write it. All right, and there's a couple different ways to do this. You could always Google some other. The other way that you could write it is to continue that on and say y minus 7 equals, distribute 3x plus 6, add 7, add 7. So this is going to be y equals 3x plus 13. Okay, so it's still got the same slope, which means it's parallel, but it's got a different y-intercept because it goes through a different point. Okay. Number 3, write an equation of a line that is parallel to the line y equals 8 and passes through the point -5, 2. So if you remember on the graph, any equation, so if this is my x-axis, this is my y-axis, if it says y equals 8, that's going to be all the way up here at 8, and it's going to look like this. Okay, so that's y equals 8, right? So if it's parallel to that, it's also going to be a y equals formula, okay? And it needs to be a horizontal line that goes across, right? But what y value does it go through? Well, we've got our x and our y, so this must be 2. So this is going to be y equals 2, parallel. Okay, I'm going to skip 4 and 5. 5 is very similar to number 3 that we just did. 4 is pretty close, but this is perpendicular, so you'll do the same thing as up here. The only difference is, of course, is that you'll flip that slope. Okay. All right, so number 7, write the equation of a line that is perpendicular to the line 6x minus 3y equals 8. So now you'll notice that this equation is no longer in slope-intercept. This is in standard form. Okay, and it passes through this point. So the only way we can really do this one is by converting it to slope-intercept. So we're going to subtract 6x from both sides. That gives me -3y equals -6x plus 8. And then I'm going to divide by -3. And I've got y equals 2x plus, well, not plus, minus 8/3 Not pretty, but that's okay. And we want it to be perpendicular to that. Okay, so I'm going to use point slope, which instead of it being 2, I'm going to change it to be -1/2. So opposite reciprocal slope. Okay, parenthesis x minus. Okay, so now I've got 7 and 1 that has to go through. 7 being the x value, 1 being the y value, and there's my equation. Okay, so again, we use the slope, but we make it opposite and reciprocal. Okay, which will give us the -1/2, and then you plug in your point. Okay. Number 8 only gives us 2 points, so in this case, we don't even have a slope. So you have to use the slope formula. Slope formula, m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Okay, so going back to that, just to figure out slope first, we've got 3 minus 0, so that would be 3, and 4 minus 4, well, that would be 0, which means that this is undefined, which means that this is a vertical line, which means that this is an x equals equation, not a y, because a vertical line, if you recall, will go through x, y-axis, goes through like that, right? So this is a vertical line, but it says write an equation of the line that is perpendicular to that. Okay, well now that tells us it was x equals, so we don't want that. We want y equals, because x and y, when you have x equals versus y equals, those are perpendicular lines. So we've got y equals, and of course, we've got our point right here that it's got to go through, which is -2, 5. So that tells you this equation is going to be y equals 5. Okay, so we used the slope formula here to figure out the slope was going to be 3 over 0, right? And if you want to write this out a little bit further, you can as well. You could say that this is 3 minus 0 over 4 minus 4. And again, that gives you 3 over 0, which is undefined because you can't have 0 in the bottom. Okay, so you're just writing equations. You can always look this up through Algebra 1, but just a quick review before we do coordinate proofs and things like that. So this should all be pretty familiar. I will say that number 10 is kind of a challenge. You're just trying to find a point and its slope that is perpendicular, but if you graph it or try to identify using the slope formula with this one, and you might have to plug in a variable to start, you should be able to figure it out. Okay, all right, so submit this. Whatever you get completed, I'll answer questions on Monday, and we'll see you then.